Hello and welcome. My name is Larissa and I'm a nerdy freelance artist who loves Disney and drinks way too much tea. And on today's art blog, I'm going to talk a little bit about the importance of thinking ahead as you work throughout a piece. And we're finally getting to the focus of this commission that we've been following, because today I'm going to start painting the dogs. If you've missed any of those videos, I will link them in the description box down below, but be sure to subscribe and ring the bell for notifications because this painting alone still has several really cool gems to be discovered. So as usual, I've determined the area that I'm going to work on today, and I'm going to take that area, divide it into different shapes, and work from the background working forward to the foreground. So for today, I'm starting with Sebastian's foot detail. When I started this piece, I made sure to take the paint for my background area and bring it into the areas for the foreground elements. That way, when I start painting the areas that are closer to the viewer in space, I will actually be taking that paint over top of my background area, and that will sort of help cheat the foreground element in front of the background element for the viewer. So I start by adding some strands and tufts of fur back over top of my background, rather than trying to fill my fur in very specific areas that I have left over. That gives me the freedom to be a little more impromptu and expressive as I'm painting the fur, rather than trying to work into some cookie cutter shapes that I have sort of painted myself into a corner with earlier. Next, I need to determine my color palette for Sebastian here and begin laying in a sort of contrast level. For my painting overall, and then for each individual item within that painting, I like to sort of gradually build up my contrast levels. I don't want to sort of pigeonhole myself and have this really high contrast area and then later on kind of regret that and have to go back and sort of kill that contrast. I find it a lot easier to go back in later and add in a little more of that contrast to sort of amp that up if I feel the need. This painting also has two dogs of the same breed, so they're obviously going to look very similar, but I want to make sure that they coordinate nicely together, but don't look too cookie cutter again and identical. So I am going to make sure that I give each dog its slightly different color palette, while still trying to make sure that they work nicely together in space and feel like they belong together. I don't want the viewer's main focus of Sebastian to be on his tail and his leg, so while I'm making sure I have enough contrast there and enough color so that he reads as in the foreground, I'm keeping him kind of fuzzy and indistinct. That way this lower area won't pull too much of the viewer's focus and I can draw the eye upwards. So as I work my way up Sebastian, I'm going to gradually increase my contrast, my saturation, and my level of detail. As an artist, I tend towards very high saturation and very high contrast, but when I'm painting what should be a white dog like Sebastian, I have to really keep myself in check so that even if I use some purples and blues and whatnot in his shading, he still needs to read as a white dog, not a purple dog. Even though a purple dog actually sounds kind of awesome. My style is fairly realistic, but tends ever so slightly towards sort of a fantasy art. I lean slightly towards sort of an impressionism with my brushstrokes, but not quite as loosey-goosey as, say, a Monet. Since I'm working it back to front, I really need to plan ahead as to what areas are going to be on top of the one I'm painting currently. Sebastian has this big, dramatic sort of mane of fur, so as I painted his legs and chest area, I needed to add in some shading there so that it would definitely look as if that big mane of fur was on top of those other areas. Likewise, the collar that he's wearing will also be casting a shadow on that mane of fur. And that collar is another area that is completely out of my imagination and I did not use a photo reference for. On a dog as floofy and furry as Sebastian, in real life, all that floof is going to completely eat up the collar visually, so in person or in pictures, you're really not going to see much of the collar and the name tag. So I kind of had to go and use a little artistic license and not use like actual photo reference for that portion of the painting. And just as I painted a lot more background than I knew I would need and then painted over that with Sebastian, I definitely painted more collar than I knew I would need and then just planned on painting fur over that. So now that I have most of Sebastian painted in, I've established a few ground rules. I've established his color palette while juggling the contrast levels and the level of detail to sort of guide the viewer's eye through the composition and up towards the focus that I would like them to pay attention to, which is more of Sebastian's face. All while having to plan ahead to the next section for my cast shadows for things like a dog tag or the floof or the collar. All of those items are going to be casting shadows onto items that I am painting before them. So you definitely have to keep in your mind ahead on your next few steps and definitely plan way ahead and keep all that in mind, all while juggling things like color palette and shading. This is a great example how art is both seeing what is actually there and translating it onto paper or canvas, while also kind of having to figure out how the item is actually perceived by a viewer, because we don't always see what's actually there. That's part of why this piece is so much fun for me, because it combines a lot of realism and actual details that I'm trying to capture, but I also get to have a lot of artistic freedom with this piece. I hope you found this helpful and inspiring. If you did, remember to like down below, and I hope you will tune in for future art vlogs with this same painting. Have a beautiful day, and I'll see you next time.